Welcome to Tabletop Tactics. Coming up on today's show.
Hey guys, Lawrence here from Tabletop Tactics, coming at you with a special No Retreat Legends tournament report. I know a lot of you guys out there love to hear how we've done here at Tabletop Tactics at tournaments and a play-by-play of the different rounds and so forth. So that's exactly what this video is. So before I get into it, let me give a massive shout out to SN Battle Reports, who hosted the No Retreat Legends tournament. That was hosted in Gibraltar, amazingly on a boat, like a super yacht if you like, cruise ship style, where a bunch of YouTubers from all over the globe, including some names which of course I'd be very surprised if you hadn't already heard about, battled it out over 5 rounds, all in the name of charity, and the SN team actually managed to raise just over £13,000, if I'm not mistaken, for charity, which is just incredible and was the whole purpose of the event. So big shout out to them. You can find them right here on YouTube, and also they have a website as well, snbattlereports.com. Go check them out. Lots of good events and lots of cool battle reports too. So with no further ado, let's go over the tournament. So first of all, what did I take? Well, I of course took the Drukhari. I had to, right? I am the spider, and also I wanted to take an army which I painted. I was very tempted by the Flesh Terrors. They're not doing so well currently in the competitive meta, if you like, but this wasn't a hardcore competitive event. And as a result, it also allowed me to do something a little bit left field with my Drukhari, rather than run your standard sort of meta list, which you're seeing at the moment. So let's go over my list. It was a single battalion. That's all it was. It was just a single battalion. No triple patrol, no double patrol, none of the usual things that you'd expect to see. And it was, because this is close to my heart, just a pure Kabalite force. That's actually how I enjoy running Drukhari the most. I was always drawn to the Kabals personally. It's not that I don't like the Witch Cult or the Covens, but I painted up Kabalites predominantly, then I veered off into doing the Witches and then became famous for the whole Reaver spam thing, right? But that was many editions ago, and we're now in 9th edition. So this is single battalion, Black Heart, and I'll go over the reasons why I've taken what I've taken here, and then of course we'll get into the games and we'll see how I did, right? So with the battalion, I had, of course, the Spider as the Warlord. So the Spider had to be there, I had to make him the Warlord, and because he's the Warlord, I was able to give him Hatred Eternal, which is the Warlord trait which allows you to reroll all hits and wounds. Now this is a Black Heart detachment, so he could innately reroll a single hit anyway, but rerolling all hits and wounds, especially when you give him something like the Djin blade, which I did, which is a damage 3 husk blade basically, with lots of attacks, it actually makes him a serious threat in combat. And I felt that my list would lack a little bit of combat punch across the board, so I was trying to find ways to insert combat power where possible. So to double up with the Spider, I of course then in my second HQ had to take the dog, Drazhar, big on the underground scene. He's a bit of a rap star in Commorragh. That's why he's got all of that bling around his neck, you know what I mean? So he wasn't the Warlord, so therefore he didn't get that very cool Warlord trait of rerolling all hits and wounds, but I've generally found, sometimes I do miss it, of course, you send Drazhar into something super tough and you want those rerolls, but I've generally found with his +1 to wound inbuilt, he's kind of a monster anyway, and actually the power amplification that it gives the Spider is so massive that it then gives you 2 really viable combat characters, so that's why I ended up doing that. I did miss out on things like Ancient Evil, but you know, we'll talk about perhaps potential list changes after this. So those are the 2 HQ, very simple. We then move on to the troops, which is also super simple. We had 6 units of 5 Kabalite Warriors with a single blaster. So there's no Trueborn here. And of course, this was done pre the balance, recent balance update where points went up. But, you know, I had a funny little feeling that something like that might happen. So I wasn't wanting to run something which was reliant on your traditional Trueborn and Witches and all this sort of jazz, right? So I've just gone for bog standard Kabalite Warriors, 6 units of 5. Now, of course, to transport them round in style, and yes, we've taken a slight points increase now, which would of course change this list slightly, but not much, funnily enough. I have taken the Raiders. I still think they're really good. Come on, guys, the Dark Lance is just silly with D3 plus 3 damage. It's just really silly. You then make it Black Heart, of course, and you're re-rolling a hit with it as well. So it's just bonkers good. So I had 6 of those. Then we go over to the elites. Now, this is where I needed that assault power in this force. I've got quite a lot of firepower now, a good core, lots of objectives secured, but I definitely needed units to back up Drazhar and the Spider. So I took 3 units of 5 Incubi. Nothing needs to be said about these. Drazhar obviously amplifies them further. You know, the Spider amplifies them as well because he can give them the reroll ones to hit. They're very, very good. Against most targets. That's what's so good about them. They're very flexible. They kill Marines very easily, and they also can threaten even vehicles, funnily enough, especially when those 6s come up to wound. So 3 units of 5 Incubi, and then they, of course, could join 3 Raiders, one of which the Spider would be in, and one of which Drazhar would be in also. We then go over to fast attack. Now, currently, the list is still lacking a bit of that anti-horde flexibility. You know, there are still going to be things where you got 20-person blobs, you know, all that sort of jazz, which you need to deal with. And also sometimes just a unit of infantry on an enemy objective that you really want to clear off. 3 units of Scourge, that's what I took with Shredders. Really pleased with these guys. Really, really pleased with these guys. For 80 points, they've not been affected by the balance update. They kick out a ton of shots, and they are blasts too. So if you are facing, you know, people with 11 or more models, you're actually getting your max shots off, which is pretty scary. Really pleased with these. Was pretty much using Never Stationary on one of these units a turn. For those of you which aren't familiar, that's a 2 CP stratagem that the Drukhari have, which allow you to move 7 inches after you've fired. So you could do a sort of jump out, shoot, and then jump back and hide from your opponent. And you know, when that's 4d6, strength 6, -1 shots a turn, it's really annoying for your opponent. So, you know, they're quite good. Then, what I did, which is super left field, everyone be like, oh my goodness, what are you doing, Spider? You're crazy. I took 3 Ravagers. Oh my goodness, 3 Ravagers for another 9 Dark Lances in total, because I gave them all the Dark Lance. Why did I do this? A couple of reasons. One, as I said, I'm going pure Kabal, right? So this is where you're normally spending the points on like your Witch Cult detachment, or maybe you're going in for your Covens now with your Talos, with your Heat Lance. Yes, I know that's all good. I know it's good, but Triple Ravager, which have also just taken a slight decrease in points, hello, are also very, very good. Not to be underestimated. And actually, in a meta where there were buggies running around everywhere, lots of, you know, Cognis Lascannon chickens and flyers spammed everywhere, although obviously things have been helped now with the balance update, actually packing as much Dark Light as I could into the list, good range Dark Light, I found really, really useful. So I back that choice, and I think the Triple Ravager is actually really good. And if you're doing something like the mirror matchup where, you know, someone's running Talos, those Talos aren't going to like 3 Ravagers staring at them. They might say, oh, well, my Talos are better. They might say that, but they're not going to enjoy those 3 Ravagers staring at them. It's still a valid counter, you know what I mean? So you don't have to mix in the Talos or the Witches to be competitive, right? So that was the list, and the beauty was, of course, it was 2,000 points on the nose. I mean, it was just meant to be, wasn't it? There are definitely some things, having played the games, that I would change, for sure. But why don't we cover that afterwards as we go into the 5 games at the No Retreat Legends. Let's talk game 1. It was against Julien, aka Heavy, from French Wargaming Studio, an amazing battle report channel, gaming channel. And Julien was an absolute gent. Really a pleasure meeting him. It was a pleasure meeting everyone there, you know. So I met old friends and then I made new ones too. But Julien was a great guy and a great player. And he actually wrote, I think he writes lists in quite a similar way to me. He thinks in a similar way. So I'm going to give you a quick little rundown of the basics of what he had. It was Argent Shroud, which is obviously very good. You could get your rerolls in there. And of course, to amplify things like that, we saw Armorium Cherubs on things like 2 units of Retributors with multi-melters. And then he had 2 Dominion squads, which had the Storm Bolters, which he can have that stratagem, do potential mortal wounds. It's all scary. And because they're master crafted Storm Bolters, like damage 2, right? Which is just bonkers. So we're playing Sororitas, obviously, by the way, if you haven't guessed. And he had Sacrosanct because they're just, again, bonkers good with the bodyguard rule. And then he had 3 units of Zephyrin, which are really, really good at, with the banners, you know, really good at deep striking in, getting off charges, doing things like retrieve Octarius data, really flexible unit, a fast unit, and something which you're constantly having to protect your back lines because you're worried about them. And then he had a single Exorcist, which he used really well because there's a stratagem for the Sororitas where you can fire out of line of sight. So basically with 1 Exorcist, it's quite a nice play. I know that a lot of people are a bit down on the Exorcist, but if you've got 1 and you're actually hiding it behind terrain, you know, deep behind terrain, hopefully somewhere where your opponent can't easily get to it or see it. Actually, 1's really powerful, and you just use that shoot out of line of sight strat every turn because they do have some serious firepower. You know, and he used it well. He played it really well. So look, we got into the game, and you'll be seeing that as I've been speaking about this, there's been a bunch of pictures because yes, I actually took some pictures at this event. I managed to snap some of them in. And again, that's a shout out to the SN team because there was a really nice break in between each game. And so it was a lot more relaxed than your regular tournament where you're rushing and packing up your army and getting to another table. So I was actually able to take my time and have a few more pictures for you bosses to see out there. So look, he got first turn. You know, we did the roll off. I lost the roll off. I would have liked the first turn for sure because he had such heavy firepower. And on the deployment that we had, I wasn't going to be able to get everything out of range, you know, because the Dominions get like a pre-game move and all that sort of jazz. But there it is. He got the first turn and he did down. I think he downed like 1 Ravager and 2 Raiders. Like he hit me pretty hard, you know, it was a good blow. Spread out onto the objectives. I'm trying to remember how the game played as best I can, guys. You just have to bear with me. But when I returned fire, I obviously managed to kill some Retributors that had jumped out. I killed one of the transports. I managed to I got beads on the Exorcist, but I didn't destroy it. I got it down to like 3 wounds, and he kept rolling his 6-up invons with that's it. It's funny, he writes lists like me, he thinks like me, and then he rolls like me too. So it was like I was playing myself. It was amazing. So look, it was actually a really close KG game. Okay, so we went through the game, we got through the turns, and actually when the game ended, because we had both been like denying each other the primary, you know, like I'd score 10, he scored 10, you know, this sort of jazz, and we've both been scoring our secondaries. We ended on a draw. It was like 74 points each. So when the game ended, it was a draw. This is the second draw I've ever had in 9th edition. It just doesn't happen, except to me, twice. So I guess it does happen. But that shows you, it's a testament to how close the game was. I think if I'd gone first, I probably would have picked him because I would have gotten the Alpha Strike off and some of those Retributors would have been out on foot because he took his, I think it's called the Sacred Rite, the blessing basically where you can advance and shoot without penalty. It's all very horrible. So those Retributors just get out, they get the extra 3-inch move for getting out, and then they move up, then they advance, and then they shoot you. It's nasty. So if I had gotten the first turn, I actually could have nullified quite a bit of that. Certainly have dealt with at least 1 unit, which would have meant I would have received a lot less firepower. And then I think in the terms of the war of attrition, I would have pipped him, but look, he played it brilliantly. It was a great game and great to actually meet Julien for the first time. And look, I was really happy with that, a draw, because that list from a sister's perspective is pretty competitive. You know, it's up there with as competitive as you can get for sisters. There are definitely some other variants where you can go, you know, Sacrosanct spam and take Morven Val and Celestine and all that jazz. But actually, this is a really good alternative variant, alternative play to it. So look, great game. First one was a draw. Still in the running, in theory, to win it, because there's only 5 rounds in this, so you can actually win it even with a loss. And I was like, okay, well, look, I've had a pretty tough matchup, my first game. If I can do well there and at least get the draw and not lose, then hopefully I should be able to do well going forward. Game 2. Game 2 was against Tom from Hellstorm Wargaming. Hello, sir. How are you? What an absolute gent. An absolute pleasure meeting Tom for the first time. And he was basically running the army that I wanted to run, which is very funny. He was running the variant of the Flesh Tearers that I was interested in trying, right? Which is basically, I think it's Jack Harpster from Art of War has been running this relatively successfully in a few events. I think he's jumped now to Grey Knights, which is understandable. The Blood Angels are a tough one to play, but you're basically looking at Sanguinary Guard, Vanguard Veterans. These are like max squads. Cheeky unit of Death Company for the Forlorn Fury stratagem, which for those of you which aren't familiar, gives you basically a pre-game move at the beginning of the battle round. So you can use it to hide them, or you can frontline and then use it to aggressively move forward, and then you move again, and then basically you're very likely a first turn charge guy. So you load this unit up with Thunderhammers, and you go and nuke 1 or 2, or maybe even 3 alpha units, depending on how soft they are in your opponent's lines. So nasty stuff, good tactic. And he had a Blade Guard, a Dante in there. You know, basically it was a mirror of what the Blood Angels lists that have been doing relatively well recently. And look, a lot of fun. Blood Angels are very, very close to my heart. Obviously I'm playing Flesh Tearers, but effectively it's the same thing, except I don't get, my toys aren't quite as nice, but we're cooler because we're Flesh Tearers, so you know, what's up. So he nearly ran the list. He was running pretty much what I nearly ran, and that was a tough one, because this is one of the reasons why I didn't run it. He's facing me now. He's facing Drukhari, Black Hearts, serious firepower list, and he's basically got no firepower. We then roll out, I forget the mission, but it was that basically the hammer and anvil deployment where you're on the short edge of both table sides, and that means he's got a long way to go, right? So he really wants first turn in this instance. He wants first turn to make it an interesting game. Now, obviously, I could whiff. Never assume you're definitely going to win anything, guys. Games of dice don't work that way. And also, don't be arrogant. You just don't know what might happen. Let's try and have a fun game regardless. So I was like, well, look, if he goes first, this could be on. Something interesting could happen. Unfortunately, he didn't go first. I went first. And because I'm so fast, there was great terrain at the event. Terrain was not an issue. Plenty of LOS blocking everywhere, in my humble opinion. Plus, it actually looked really nice, which is something which I like at a tournament. So, you know, I opened up and I start killing a lot of models. Okay, start killing his, he had a couple of incursors or infiltrators which moved forward onto objectives, deployed on objectives. So I just basically removed him from the primary to deny him scoring. And I started opening up on his elite units. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out what happened here. Okay, so he's obviously moving across the board as fast as he can at me, but I've got 2 to 3 turns of really good quality firepower before he can even get to my lines. So it's just a simple matter of I pre-measure, I make sure that I'm 13 inches away even after he's moved from his max charge, so he can't even declare a charge. And he had, like, you know, the Sanguinary Ancient with the Wrath of Baal, which is absolutely the right thing to do, which gives you a +2 move. So his jump pack's actually, Sanguinary Guard and Vanguard Vets are moving like 14 inches, which is fantastic. But, you know, when you've got Raiders and Ravagers moving at 14 inches also, it's kind of like a, you know, he moves, I move. He moves, I move away, and I just keep shooting every time. It's, you know, it's a shame. It was an unfortunate matchup, but look, he took it like an absolute gent. Really lovely guy, Tom. Hello if you're watching this. And there wasn't too much he could do. He didn't misplay anything. He tried to get onto the primary objectives. He tried to hold the center board and hem me in. But if I just keep shooting him off the objectives, and then or you can do cheeky things like, well, I'll throw a raider at that unit, you know, and if you destroy it in combat, I'll drop the unit out. These are like little tactics that I could play, which I didn't even need to, because I was just able to just shoot him off. He just wasn't able to hold the primary. So in the end, it was a big win for me. I got like 94 points, and Tom, I can have a little look at this here. Tom got Where are you? He got 15. Yeah. You know. Didn't do anything wrong. Bad matchup. And unfortunately, that's the way tournaments can go sometimes. Just a mismatch of the list. But what I would say, and this is where I've been leaning with it anyway, is because of matchups like that, and again, like if he played York Buggy Spam, there's almost nothing you can do. You can't even hide from them. So you're just like, oh, what a shame, right? The Blood Angels, to survive, to be viable, they need some firepower. They have to have some firepower in 9th to be competitive, in my opinion. How Jack was doing so well with the pure combat, I salute you, sir. But, you know, you're going to have those matchups where you just lose. So, yeah. So that was game 2. Game 3. Game 3, some of you may have already seen, because it was my pleasure to play Winter's SEO of YouTube fame, right here on YouTube, on the live stream. So you might have already watched it. So I might be beating a dead horse here. You might be like, I've seen this game. I know what happened. But I'm going to run it back anyway, because my goodness, what a game it was. This was a really, really, really close game. And when Winters and I drew each other and we looked at the lists, we were like, well, this is just a game of 4s. That's what I called it. It's a game of 4-ups, because if I keep making my 4-ups, because he's running a Deathwing, pure Deathwing. So I can only wound him on 4-ups effectively, right? Even with my Dark Light or higher strength weaponry, doesn't matter. You wound him on a 4-up. And he's got 4-up invulnerable saves. So if I keep making my 4-ups, but he keeps making his 4-ups, he will win. If he fails his 4-ups, it could be over really quickly. If he has like 1 or 2 really unlucky turns in a row, because the army isn't that big, you know, even though it's kind of like a Horde Terminator army, funnily enough, but it's still not a massive Horde army, right? It is effectively an elite army. If he has a couple of turns of bad luck, it could be over really quickly, because he just won't have enough models on the objectives, then I should be able to swarm forward, etc. As it turns out, I forget who went first. I went first. So I won the roll-off to go first. Winters, we were playing a Dawn of War deployment, and there were 3 objectives basically in your deployment zone. He took the classic, you know, competitive Deathwing thing at the moment, which is, you know, Oaths of Moment. You go to the center of the board. He's got all of the Deathwing Terminators, and he's got Blade Guards, and he's of course got the Apothecary to bring people back and heal them and so forth. Basically what they do is they sit there on the objectives and they don't move. They don't need to, and then they go forward in the center and they hold that. All the list is designed to do is sit there, move forward and score points. He's got Cyclone missile launchers in there, so he can do a little bit of aggressive stuff. You know, he's got a few Storm Bolters, but the list isn't really about killing people per se. It's quite happy to sit there and just wait for the opponent to come to them, because of course in 9th edition, you need to score the primary too, generally speaking, right? So you're going to have to push forward, but the problem is the minute you push forward, the Deathwing are seriously super good in combat. So that's how the list works. You sit there on the objectives, you score the points, hoping that the opponent won't come to you because, or in fact, you probably often hope that they do, because you'll usually beat them in combat, unless it's a really vicious combat army, which has a lot of attacks, enough attacks that can bring things like Deathwing Terminators down. So, what happened? I went first, and quite honestly, you know, I think I killed 2 Terminators, maybe. I might have only killed 1 in my first turn. I don't remember. It was a paltry amount. I didn't wipe a unit. Let's put it that way. And I absolutely loaded up on 1 squad. So I identified immediately that his central squad, where the Apothecary was, and where he was going to push up and do the Oaths of Moment, it was too well fortified. I wasn't guaranteed to wipe a unit, and then if I didn't wipe the unit, the Apothecary was going to bring 1 back, and it would be like a war of attrition that I would lose. So I identified immediately that I needed to take the right and left flank objectives, where he was much weaker. He only had like 1 or 2 Terminator units on there. So I identified if I could get him off of that primary, then I would be able to pip him and win on the primary going forward, because he wasn't going to come to me either, because the thing is I had my counter, I had all my Incubi and Drazhar and, you know, the Spider and so forth, so he wasn't too keen at pushing towards me, but he wouldn't have liked it if I'd taken him off for the primary objective, and at that point I'd be applying pressure and he'd have to do something. So as it turned out, I laid down a withering amount of fire. I only killed a couple of Terminators, didn't wipe the squad. He fires back, you know, manages to destroy a Raider. do some damage to a Ravager. Again, ultimately a pretty paltry amount, but he's scoring points. You know, he's setting himself up to score points. And I'm doing my Retrieve Octarius data, which I pretty much took in every mission, as I recall. So I'm starting all of that off. The Scourges would jump forward. I would do Never Stationary on 1, you know, just at 18-inch range, and then move back at 7 inches. But the problem is Deathwing Terminators in cover, they basically have a 1-up save, or if they've got a Storm Shield, they've got a 1-up save. So the -1 AP, they're still getting a 2-up anyway. And where I'm usually strength 6 and I'm benefiting more from getting lots of wounds, I'm only winning him on 4s. So actually what happened was I would get, you know, 5-6 wounds through, maybe, you know, with the Scourge, and then he's saving on 2. So at that point, you've got your unit, which is investing a lot of firepower, but it's only doing a wound. It's not even killing a Terminator at that point. So I was completely reliant on these Dark Lances to go through. And look, over the course of the game, they did go through. Sometimes. But Winters was rolling super, super, super hot. In fact, he rolled at one point 8 4-up saves in a row. And then when he finally failed it and killed one, he went on to his 5-up Crux Terminators, and then he would make that save instead. So look, it was perfect. It was a perfect storm. But despite that, the game was very, very close, because whilst he was scoring his primary and his secondary, I too was scoring my primary and my secondary. So what I needed to do was just get ahead of him on the primary once. Now, I did knock him off one of the primary once, and I made 2 other big, bold plays to knock him off the primary in subsequent turns. The first of which was sending a Raider into his units, into his Thunderhammer and Power Fist units, to destroy, so that he would be forced to destroy the Raider. The Kabalite Warriors would get out, and I would steal the objective from him. So this is, I was a sacrificial boat, if you like, right? A very, very clever play, if I don't say so myself, and statistically, he should have destroyed them. The funny thing is that that's, of course, where his luck failed. Where he should have destroyed the Raider in combat with his Deathwing Terminators, he rolled really poorly. Failed to destroy it, which then meant that my Kabalite Warriors couldn't jump out on the objective, and that meant that he still held that primary. So that was my attempt 1 at just like pressuring him and stealing the primary, and then I would have had a greater lead. Objective number 2, or attempt number 2, is where I had the Spider go forwards with a unit of Incubi, and I had a Kabalite Warrior squad, and this was just my mistake. I thought the Kabalite Warrior squad were all within 3 inches of the objective, so all I needed to do was kill a couple of Terminators, and I would have outnumbered his OBSEC models on the left flank. As it turned out, I forgot to move them. I didn't move them because I thought they were within 3. As it turns out, there was only 2 within 3. Big mistake, because that would have meant I just stole the objective. And funnily enough, as we came to the end of the game, it would have meant that I won the game by like 2 points. So in such a tight game, one mistake can lose you it. So it ended something like 89 to 83. The reason it would have ended, it would have meant that I won the games because he wouldn't have scored that additional 5 primary points, and I would have been up an additional 5 primary points. So that's why it would have swung the other way. But look, fantastic game. I think it wasn't actually the closest of the event, because Winters then went on to play Stephen, who had really competitive sisters as well, Adeptus Sororitas, probably about as good as you can get sisters-wise. And it was like 91 to 92 points. Winters beat him. It was like a point in it. So he played 2 really, really tight games. If I'm not mistaken, he actually lost his second game to Drukhari, to Angel from Deep Games. Hey mate, how are you? So I'm not sure what the score was on that, but basically it played some pretty savage lists so far, and the Deathwing were able to stand, but they did lose to Engel's Drukhari list. So look, fantastic game. It was like a complete nail biter. It went the full 5 turns. You know, you all have seen it on stream. You can go check it out on the SN Battle Reports YouTube channel. And with that loss, I was like, right, okay. I don't think I can win the event now, but I could probably podium still. Or if I keep scoring highly, because at this point, all 3 of my games, I'd scored big points, big points. And at that point, I was currently in the lead for battle points as well, which basically means I've been scoring more points than my opponents, generally speaking, and then other people that have also been winning. So it's like, right, I've got 2 more games. The day 2 is coming up. Let's see what happens. I'll probably get some other tough matchups. But if I win big, you know, hopefully I can walk away with something for the channel. So let's see how game 4 went. Game 4. I was paired with my old friend, Shaggy. He's part of the SN team, and he has the Noble Ultramarines. So no Rebute Guilliman, but he did have Calgar, he did have Blade Guard, he did have Aggressors, and he was doing the Oaths of the Moment trick as well, and basically damage 1 weapons on the Aggressors, you could effectively give yourself a +1 save, so they'd have a 2-up save, and then you'd have the Apothecary to help bring them back, Blade Guard surrounding to protect all of his characters, Tigurius, you know, this sort of jazz. Unit of Inceptors with Assault Bolters, just designed to do things like Rod or take an enemy squad off of their home objective. It was actually quite a clever list, and it was really well played by Shaggy. You know, he played it really, really well, and he made me work for the ultimate victory that I got. But ultimately, I won because, in a similar sense to what happened with Tom with his Blood Angels, while Shaggy's list was good, and he had Dreadnoughts as well. He had a Volkite, I think it was a double twin Lascannon Contemptor, if I remember correctly. He had a Redemptor Dreadnought. I think it was just the 2. So he had some firepower, which is semi-decent, and of course he had a unit of Eradicators as well. My target priority number 1 was to take out the Eradicators, because I always go with the philosophy of shoot what you can kill easily first, and the Eradicators have nasty firepower, and I'm much more likely to kill them than a Dreadnought with my Dark Light, even if he did Transhuman. So that's what I did. But over the course of 3 or 4 turns, it actually, because those Aggressors were remarkably tough, it actually took me 3 turns to whittle them down to 1 left, and of course, like, I'd get them to 2 left, and he'd bring 1 back, and then I'd kill 2 the next turn, he'd bring another 1 back, you know, with the Apothecary. And he's got all of the bodyguard rules happening, so I couldn't get to his characters. But by turn 3, I snuck my units with the Incubi and Drazhar and the Spider forward enough to do a really good advance and charge on that central hub, if you like, and I ultimately, by this point, destroyed the... He had a Venerable Dreadnought, that's it. I destroyed the Venerable Dreadnought, I'd killed the Eradicators, I'd taken away his OBSEC scoring for the most part. And I was in a position to do my death blow, if you like, my death strike. And so when I got the charge off, the Spider and Drazhar, the Tormentors went off. I think it was on Drazhar or the Incubi, but basically it made his Blade Guard strike last, a pretty significant unit, which meant that my other units could clean up. And I actually managed to kill Calgar, the Apothecary, the Blade Guards, and the last Aggressor all in 1 turn, all in combat. And that was like the death knell, basically. But look, it was really well played, and he scored a lot of points. He got like 60 odd points, 64 points, something like that. And I ended up getting 90-ish points. So again, a massive victory for me, but really well fought, and definitely gave me some ideas on how to use the Ultramarines myself, because I've got a soft spot for them, as some of you may well know. So that was game 4. What was game 5, the final game of the event? Let's find out. Game 5. Guess what? It was Ultramarines again. Just randomly, weirdly, it was Ultramarines again. But this time it was helmed even, by Antonio, who is an absolute mega boss from Deep Games. We had such a huge amount of fun playing this game. It was the last game of the event, okay? You get to the point where it's just... everything was funny. Everything was funny. It was one of those games where everything was funny. Thing would explode if you didn't want it to, like his Redemptor exploded at one point in a really, really bad way for him. He had Guilliman with the face was done to look like Antonio. It was amazing. So anyway, look, he's got Guilliman. He's got a very similar list, except instead of Calgar, he's running Guilliman. He had a Redemptor Dreadnought. He did have 1 Volkite Contemptor. I think it was a Volkite Contemptor. Aggressors, Blade Guards. So obviously him and Shaggy have been in cohorts, and they've been sharing tips on how to run these Ultramarines. So I was like, oh, okay, well, I've got the same matchup, but different. However, this time, I think the deployment favored me more, because Shaggy was quite, he was able to get into the center ball quite quickly and easily with the setup in that mission, whereas Antonio was sort of spread across 2 flanks. And obviously I'm super fast, right? So to cut a long story short, it was a very similar style matchup to the one against Shaggy, in that I was able to lay down a withering amount of firepower and slowly bring him down. A couple of the key fights were him having a Redemptor Dreadnought on the right flank, holding it up, and unfortunately, he got really quite unlucky, to be honest. I was rolling hot that game, and like the Redemptor Dreadnought was destroyed ultimately by a unit. He sent. This is how bad it was. He like sent a Redemptor Dreadnought into a unit of Incubi to kill them in combat. He charged, right? He had killed 1 with shooting because he was just rolling really poorly. He then charged. He only killed 1 more. The 3 Incubi struck back, and I rolled a couple of 6s for the damage 3 as well, and I took something like 6 wounds. 6 wounds. Like the Redemptor should have killed the Incubi, but they didn't. Instead, I take 6 wounds from him, and then the next turn, I was able to use Cruel Deception to fall back with the Incubi, and then just shoot. I got him down to, I actually killed him with the shooting. I didn't even need to charge in the end. But yeah, and that was holding his primary objective, trying to take me off of it. So it was one of those things where once he had lost that flank, and again, I targeted his Eradicators early because he had a unit of those. Tried to take away the firepower, which was strong enough to destroy my vehicles, so that I had superiority with armor. And yeah, it went the same way, except this time I was able to score big again. I got 90+ points. I got, in fact, 92 points, and he was only able to score 23 points because with this particular deployment, he wasn't able to push forward as quickly and as effectively to score the primary and get the secondaries that he needed. So look, a fantastic game, and that was the end of the event. So at this point, we have the awards ceremony, and who is victorious? The trophies are laid out on the table and the winners are called up. And my goodness, was it a tight race for that top 5. So Adrian from Tabletop Titans and Bridger was also doing well as well, to be fair, as was Stephen. Vanguard Tactics. So there were a bunch of us. Julien went on to win, I think, the rest of his games. There were a bunch of us all vying for position, if you like, all relatively high scoring. But at this point, I actually had the highest battle points score. So what that means is I'd won the most points, the highest margin of victory, if you like. But I'd lost a game and I'd drawn a game. Okay, so that goes against you in terms, I forget what it's called, path to victory? Something competitive, you know. So the loss, you know, it knocks you down. So at this point, we don't know who's podiuming for sure, because the 2nd and 3rd place, and even the 1st place at this point, was kind of up for debate. So I didn't think I was in the top 3, but I thought I might get like top 4, maybe 5. And Adrian, with his Orc buggy spam, was obviously cleaning up, but he had lost his game to Winters, so he's picked up a loss as well. Again, Winters obviously I don't know what happened in that game, but I'm assuming he kept rolling his invulnerable saves, and Adrian just couldn't chew through him fast enough. So what ended up happening was Adrian came 2nd, Mikey came 3rd, from Hellstorm, because he was running Iron Hand Space Marine List, which he'd obviously piloted well. Don't know what games he played, so I can't comment too much on it. And Winters came 1st. And there was like a couple of points in it. It was like nothing. It was like nothing in it. So Winters, with the Deathwing, manages to take the 1st place trophy and win the event for charity, which was absolutely amazing. It was you know, a really, really close fought race. And I think it made for a really exciting event, which is really, really cool. So here's the thing. As I look at, I'm going to bring up the rankings now. So as I look at the placings, we see Winters 1st. Sorry, forgive me, it was Mikey 2nd. It wasn't Adrian. Adrian obviously got pipped by Mikey in terms of the scores. Adrian got knocked down to 3rd because of his loss, even though his loss was a high scoring one. And then, of course, Engel from Deep Games came 4th with his Drukhari, and I ended up coming 5th. So the top 5, I think it was 435 battle points to 355 for Angel, 387 for Adrian, 415 for Mikey, and 431 to Winters. A super, super tight race for the top 5. And to be honest, a photo finish really for tournaments, because you don't always get such a really close call, which is really nice. So look, that was it. That was the event. As it turned out, I did get a nomination, got some glassware, which is very nice. I got Best Painted Army, which allowed me to donate £300 courtesy of Siege Studios, thank you Siege Studios, to a charity of my choice, which I ended up giving to Cancer Research UK. So I thought that was something which would be a worthy cause due to things that have affected people that I've known in the past. So it was a pleasure to be able to donate that money, and it was an absolute pleasure to play in an event which ultimately raised over £13,000 for charity, which is just incredible. So hopefully you've enjoyed that little roundup. I know it's difficult to articulate the games. Hopefully the pictures gave you a sense of things. I tried to take as many as I could, and hopefully it gave you an idea of how I might have been using my list and some of the tricks that I use. I do have a game coming up on demand where I actually use it, and I do pull off some really cool tricks with it, sort of things that I play, the style that I play it. So go check that out. If you're not an on-demand member, help us out, sign up. Can't do this without you. Just can't do it without you. But let's finish with some final thoughts. What would I change? Not too much. And I know the balance data slate has changed things, but weirdly where my Raiders went up, the Ravagers have gone down. So it's not quite a wash. I still need to find 30 points. But I can quite easily like drop a unit of Kabalite Warriors and I'm back to square one. The list pretty much continues to play as it did before. So yeah, tweaking wise, I'll let you know in future reports. But the one thing that I would change, especially having played the list quite a few times now, is I would drop Black Heart. I wouldn't go Black Heart. I know, that's a crazy one. Again, Lawrence, Black Heart's the best. Yeah, it's good. It's really good. I prefer, with my list and my play style, how I play it, Obsidian Rose. The extra range would have helped me so many times. And whilst the reroll to hit is crucial sometimes, especially if you're playing someone that's got a lot of -1s to hit or dense terrain, the reroll wound is also critical, right? Because what if you are facing something really tough? You can get the hit through easy enough, but you want the wounds to go through. You know, if people are using things like Transhuman, or maybe they are Deathwing, or maybe it's, you know, with Knights having this resurgence now potentially because of the balance updates, I might be seeing a lot of Toughness 8 chassis running around. I would rather have that reroll to wounds than the reroll to hit, right? Plus the extra range cannot be underestimated. It would have helped in so many games with range control and me staying back on an objective while still being able to effectively shoot an opponent off of theirs. So that's the change that I would make. But if you want to see some stuff more in detail, come over to On Demand. I've got some games coming up with that change actually made. So folks, hope you enjoyed that. That's been my No Retreat Legends tournament report. Shout out to Bridger from Tabletop Titans as well. He's basically my brother from another mother. We were like the same person. Which was lovely meeting both the Tabletop Titans guys, Adrian and Bridger. Sadly, Brian wasn't there. I couldn't make it last minute, but hello to you if you're watching this too. And a massive shout out to all of the awesome YouTube channels that were there. Glacial Geek, Hellstorm Wargaming, Winters, Liam from DZTV, Quips the Nerd, Alex, Phil from Rapid Fire Wargaming. I'm probably going to forget, I'm going to miss a name now, but I love you all. I love you all. Vince, Pleasant Kenobi. So look, shout out to you guys. Lovely meeting everyone, and hopefully we get to do this again at some point in the future and raise some more money for charity. It would be awesome. So until next time, I've been Lawrence. Thanks for the support, and I'll see you soon.